The bitter winter wind howled through San Francisco's streets as Mia Sullivan balanced a tray of champagne flutes, weaving through the glittering crowd at the Golden Gate Opera House. Her worn shoes pinched with every step, a harsh reminder of the 25-year-old nursing student's place among the city's elite gathering for tonight's performance. In Box 7, the most luxurious private seating in the opera house, Victoria Cavallari pressed a hand to her throat, her face flushing an unnatural crimson as she struggled for breath. The elegant 60-year-old woman's diamond necklace caught the light as she slumped against the velvet cushions, her whispered words barely audible. "Tell my son, poison." Mia noticed the older woman's distress while serving the adjacent box, her nursing instincts immediately recognizing the symptoms of thallium poisoning from her toxicology course. Without hesitation, she slipped into Box 7, abandoning her serving duties to check the woman's pulse while scanning for signs that would confirm her suspicion. "Someone call an ambulance," Mia commanded, her voice carrying an authority that belied her position as a mere server in this world of wealth and privilege. The other guests in the box stared blankly, paralyzed by shock, or perhaps unwilling to get involved in whatever was happening. Victoria clutched Mia's wrist with surprising strength, pressing a phone into the young woman's hand with trembling fingers. "Call Stefano," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "My son. Tell him I was poisoned. Box 7. Tell him only demercaprol will work. Time is running out." Mia's fingers trembled as she dialed the number, her mind racing through everything she knew about thallium poisoning and its antidote. The line connected after a single ring, and a deep, controlled voice answered. "Mother, this isn't a good time for—" "Your mother's been poisoned at Box 7 in the Golden Gate Opera House," Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm a nursing student. She's showing signs of thallium poisoning and needs demercaprol immediately, or she'll die within the hour." Stefano Cavallari's world stopped at the stranger's words, his business meeting forgotten as ice spread through his veins. The 30-year-old man rose from his leather chair, gesturing sharply to the men around him to clear the room as he switched to speakerphone, his voice dangerously calm. "Who are you, and how did you recognize thallium poisoning?" he demanded, already signaling to his driver through the glass partition of his office. His mother's condition was his only concern, but this unknown woman with her precise medical knowledge presented a puzzle he couldn't ignore. Mia's nursing textbooks had never prepared her for the reality of an actual poisoning, much less one involving the mother of a man whose reputation preceded him throughout San Francisco. "I'm Mia Sullivan, second-year nursing student at SF General," she answered quickly, pressing 2 fingers against Victoria's wrist to monitor her weakening pulse. "Stay with her," Stefano commanded, his voice leaving no room for refusal as the sound of a car engine roared to life in the background. "I'll be there in 8 minutes with the antidote. If you're lying about any of this, you won't live to regret it." Mia felt her breath catch at the thinly veiled threat, but she had no time to dwell on fear, as Victoria's condition deteriorated rapidly before her eyes. The paramedics would be too slow with standard protocol, and Mia made a split-second decision that would irrevocably change her life's trajectory. "I need ice, alcohol wipes, and any medication she has in her purse," Mia ordered the stunned companions in the box, her voice cutting through their whispered concerns. She had recognized one of the symptoms unique to thallium. The victims often experienced intense internal heat while their extremities grew cold. The opera continued on stage below, the soprano's haunting aria, providing a surreal soundtrack to the life-and-death drama unfolding in Box 7. Mia loosened Victoria's pearl choker and elevated her feet, basic first aid that seemed woefully inadequate against the deadly poison now coursing through the older woman's system. When Stefano Cavallari burst through the door of Box 7 exactly 8 minutes later, the atmosphere changed instantly, as if the air itself recognized the presence of power. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the deadly grace with which he moved, nor could his handsome features mask the dangerous intensity in his eyes. Stefano knelt beside his mother, his face betraying nothing as he assessed her condition with a single glance, before fixing his attention on the young woman in the server's uniform. He produced a small case containing several vials and a syringe, his movements precise and controlled as if he'd done this before. "You're certain it's thallium?" he asked Mia, his voice low enough that only she could hear him as he prepared the antidote. The question held layers of meaning. Was she certain enough to stake her life on this diagnosis? Mia met his gaze without flinching, her chin lifting slightly as she recited the telltale symptoms she had observed. Abdominal pain, peripheral neuropathy, rapidly progressing weakness, the metallic taste she complained of before losing consciousness, and the timing suggests it was in her champagne, which is consistent with thallium's solubility profile. "Hold her still," Stefano instructed, handing Mia the syringe while he cradled his mother's head with unexpected tenderness. Their hands brushed briefly, a fleeting moment of connection that somehow felt significant amidst the chaos surrounding them. Mia administered the demercaprol with steady hands, her medical training overriding any nervousness she might have felt under Stefano's intense scrutiny. The drug would bind to the heavy metal particles in Victoria's bloodstream, allowing her body to excrete the poison before it could cause permanent damage. Victoria's breathing gradually stabilized as the antidote took effect, color slowly returning to her ashen face while Stefano maintained a protective stance beside her. His eyes, however, never left Mia, studying her with an unreadable expression that made her increasingly aware of how far she'd strayed from her usual world. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out," one of Stefano's men reported from the doorway, his posture deferential but alert, as he scanned the gathering crowd outside Box 7. The opera had ended, and curious onlookers were beginning to notice the commotion. Stefano nodded once, then turned back to Mia with narrowed eyes that seemed to see through her carefully constructed facade of confidence. "You saved my mother's life," he stated matter-of-factly, the words carrying the weight of a debt acknowledged. Sirens wailed outside the opera house as paramedics rushed in with a gurney, their efficient movements creating a buffer between Mia and the intensity of Stefano's presence. She stepped back, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled uniform and the champagne stains on her sleeves. "I should get back to work," Mia murmured, attempting to retreat into anonymity now that professional medical help had arrived. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was beginning to ebb, leaving her lightheaded and uncomfortably aware of her precarious position. Stefano's hand closed around her wrist before she could slip away, his grip firm but not painful as he drew her attention back to him. "Your employment here is terminated," he informed her with quiet authority, ignoring her startled expression as he continued. "You're coming with us to the hospital." "I can't just leave. I need this job," Mia protested, acutely aware of the unpaid bills waiting in her apartment and the tuition payment looming at the end of the month. Her practical concerns sounded trivial, even to her own ears when weighed against a woman's life, but they were her reality. "Your manager has been compensated for your services tonight, with a substantial bonus," Stefano replied, a hint of impatience coloring his tone as the paramedics began moving his mother toward the exit. His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the stage below, where the conductor was taking his final bow. "You didn't save a random socialite tonight," he added in a lower voice, leaning close enough that Mia could detect the subtle scent of expensive cologne beneath the metallic odor of the demercaprol. "You saved Victoria Cavallari, a name that carries weight in this city for reasons you don't want to understand." The hospital waiting room felt like neutral territory, a sterile environment where the stark differences between Mia's world and Stefano's temporarily faded into the background. She sat across from him, clutching a cup of bitter vending machine coffee that she hadn't tasted, hyper-aware of the 2 men standing guard near the entrance. "You recognized a poison that most doctors wouldn't identify without extensive tests," Stefano observed, after the silence between them had stretched to uncomfortable lengths. His tone remained conversational, but his eyes were calculating, assessing her with the cool precision of a man accustomed to identifying threats. Mia shifted under his scrutiny, wondering if her quick thinking had placed her in more danger than if she'd simply called 911 and walked away. "I had a professor who specialized in uncommon toxins," she explained, the half-truth slipping easily from her lips. "And this professor taught nursing students to recognize thallium poisoning on sight?" Stefano pressed, his skepticism evident in the slight arch of his eyebrow. He leaned forward, reducing the space between them, as if physical proximity might extract the truth more effectively. Mia dropped her gaze to the linoleum floor, her mind racing to construct a plausible explanation that wouldn't raise more questions. The real story of her obsessive research into poisons after her own mother's suspicious death 3 years ago wasn't something she was prepared to share with this dangerous stranger. "I think the more relevant question is, who would want to poison your mother?" she countered, lifting her eyes to meet his with newfound boldness. If he wanted answers from her, she deserved some in return, especially if those answers might help her understand the situation she'd stumbled into. A flicker of surprise crossed Stefano's face, quickly replaced by something that might have been respect, if not for the dangerous edge underlying it. "Careful, Ms. Sullivan," he warned softly, Curiosity in my world often proves fatal. Is that a threat? Mia asked, her voice steadier than she felt as she set down her untouched coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across Stefano's features, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the vigilance in his posture. Stefano's laugh held no humor, a brief sound that disappeared as quickly as it had emerged. No, that's a fact, he corrected her, checking his watch with deliberate casualness that failed to mask his underlying impatience for news about his mother's condition. The Cavallari family has enemies, he continued after a moment, studying her reaction with unsettling intensity. People who would benefit from my mother's death, or use it as a message meant for me. Mia absorbed this information in silence, the implications settling like ice in her stomach as she processed what he wasn't saying explicitly. The rumors about the Cavallari family's connections to organized crime in San Francisco suddenly felt less like urban legends and more like dangerous truths she couldn't unknow. A doctor appeared at the entrance to the waiting room, his expression carefully neutral as he approached them. Mr. Cavallari, your mother is stable and responding well to treatment, he reported, his eyes flicking briefly, curiously, toward Mia before focusing again on Stefano. The initial intervention was crucial, the doctor continued, his professional tone unable to completely mask his curiosity about the circumstances. Whoever recognized the poison and administered the antidote so quickly almost certainly saved her life. Stefano nodded once, dismissing the doctor with a gesture before turning back to Mia, his expression unreadable as he considered her anew. The tenuous connection formed in crisis had shifted into something more complicated, a debt owed, information shared, and questions raised that neither could easily walk away from. I need to know everything about tonight, he stated rather than asked, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Every person who approached Box 7, every server who handled her food and drink, every detail you noticed before she collapsed. 3 days after the poisoning incident, Mia unlocked the door to her cramped studio apartment in the Mission District, freezing at the sight of Stefano Cavallari seated at her tiny kitchen table. The overhead light cast shadows across his sharp features as he studied her nursing textbooks with casual interest. Most people knock, she managed to say, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, while mentally cataloging possible escape routes. The contrast between his tailored suit and her secondhand furniture made the room feel even smaller than its already modest dimensions. Security precaution, Stefano replied without apology, gesturing to the empty chair across from him, as if he were the host rather than an intruder. His eyes took in the water stain spreading across her ceiling and the carefully mended curtains with an unreadable expression. Mia remained standing, arms crossed defensively as she waited for an explanation for this invasion of her private space. The thin walls of her apartment suddenly felt inadequate protection against whatever dangerous world had followed Stefano Cavallari to her doorstep. The person who poisoned my mother knows you exist, he stated bluntly, placing a manila folder on the table between them. Your name and address were circulated in certain circles within hours of the incident at the Opera House. Mia felt cold dread settle in her stomach as she finally sank into the chair opposite him, the implications of his words sinking in. Is that supposed to be a threat? Or a warning? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. Consider it both, Stefano answered, opening the folder to reveal surveillance photos of Mia leaving her apartment, attending classes, and working at her second job at a 24-hour diner. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over the past 2 days, without her noticing a thing. I won't live in fear because I helped someone, Mia said, pushing the photos away with a decisiveness that belied her inner turmoil. Her life had been precarious enough before getting entangled with whatever dangerous game the Cavallari family was playing. Stefano leaned back in the rickety chair, studying her with newfound interest as he registered her defiance, rather than the expected fear. My family has a compound in Pacific Heights with state-of-the-art security, he said after a moment, his tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. You expect me to just abandon my life and move in with strangers because of some vague threat? Mia challenged, gesturing around at her small apartment filled with carefully chosen second-hand furniture and medical textbooks purchased with hard-earned money. This may not look like much to you, but it's mine. It won't remain yours for long if you're dead, Stefano countered, his bluntness cutting through her protests. He slid another photo across the table, this one showing a broken lock on her apartment door from earlier that day while she'd been in class. Mia's breath caught as she recognized what the photo represented. Someone had been inside her home today, invading her space just as Stefano had, but with far more sinister intentions. The violation sent a chill down her spine that no amount of righteous indignation could dispel. "Pack whatever you need for 2 weeks," Stefano instructed, rising from the table with the fluid grace of a predator accustomed to having his commands obeyed. His tone left no room for negotiation as he added, "My driver will be waiting downstairs in 20 minutes. Mia stared at him in stunned silence, the realization dawning that her life had fundamentally changed the moment she entered Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House. The nursing student who worried about tuition payments and double shifts now had to contend with poisoners and Mafia protection. "I have classes, clinicals, my job at the diner. I can't just disappear," she protested, though the argument sounded hollow even to her own ears when weighed against the very real threat to her life. Her carefully constructed path toward financial stability and independence suddenly seemed fragile. The Cavallari estate stood in stark contrast to everything Mia had known, its wrought iron gates opening to reveal manicured gardens, and a mansion of imposing grandeur overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Security cameras tracked their movement as Stefano's car wound up the private driveway, the city lights twinkling below like a separate universe she'd left behind. "This is temporary," Mia reminded herself aloud, as a uniformed staff member appeared to take her single duffel bag, treating the worn canvas with the same deference they might show a designer suitcase. The absurdity of her situation hit her anew with each step into this world of privilege. Stefano watched her reaction with thinly veiled amusement, clearly accustomed to the disorientation visitors experienced upon first encountering the family's wealth. "Victoria is asking for you," he said, guiding her through the marble-floored entryway toward a sweeping staircase that seemed designed to intimidate. Victoria Cavallari's suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor, its windows offering panoramic views of the bay that would have cost millions on the real estate market. The elegant older woman sat propped against silk pillows, her recovery evident in the healthy color that had returned to her complexion. "My guardian angel arrives at last," Victoria greeted Mia with genuine warmth that seemed at odds with her regal bearing. She extended a hand adorned with a single platinum band, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had so recently been at death's door. Mia found herself drawn to the bedside, her medical training automatically assessing Victoria's vital signs, even as she tried to reconcile this elegant woman with the dying patient from Box 7. "How are your symptoms?" she asked, slipping unconsciously into her clinical persona. "Much improved, thanks to your extraordinary intervention," Victoria replied, her piercing blue eyes, so similar to her son's, studying Mia with undisguised curiosity. "Stefano tells me you're a nursing student with an unusual knowledge of poisons." Mia tensed, aware of Stefano watching the exchange from his position by the doorway, his presence a silent reminder of unanswered questions and growing suspicions. "Just part of my training," she answered carefully, unwilling to reveal how personal her interest in toxicology truly was. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and Stefano moved with practiced efficiency to intercept the staff member who entered with an envelope bearing no postmark or return address. The silent exchange and Stefano's immediate tension spoke volumes about the family's ongoing security concerns. "Another warning?" Victoria asked her son with remarkable composure, seemingly unsurprised by the development. Her casual acceptance of danger reinforced Mia's growing understanding that the Cavallari family operated in a world where threats were commonplace rather than extraordinary. Stefano's jaw tightened as he examined the contents of the envelope, his expression darkening before he crossed the room to show his mother while keeping the message hidden from Mia's view. The silent communication between mother and son left Mia feeling distinctly like an outsider, witnessing a private language she couldn't interpret. "It seems our enemies are growing impatient," Victoria observed with the calm detachment of someone discussing weather patterns rather than potential violence. She turned to Mia with renewed interest, adding, "And they're quite curious about you, my dear." Mia felt a chill race down her spine at Victoria's words, suddenly aware that she'd been drawn into something far more dangerous than she'd initially understood. "Why would anyone care about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper in the opulent room. "Because you prevented a carefully orchestrated assassination," Stefano answered bluntly, pocketing the mysterious message as he approached them. "And because they don't know how you were able to recognize the poison so quickly. A question I'm still considering myself." "I told you it was part of my toxicology training," Mia insisted, the lie feeling hollow even to her own ears. Her fingers unconsciously traced the outline of the locket hidden beneath her sweater, the one containing the only photo of her mother she had left. The black evening gown Mia found laid out on her guest room bed a week later seemed to mock her with its elegance and obvious expense. The handwritten note beside it, in Victoria's refined script, offered no opportunity for refusal. The annual Children's Hospital benefit tonight. Your attendance is expected. I can't accept this, Mia protested when Victoria entered the room minutes later, the older woman's recovery evident in her graceful movements and the healthy flush in her cheeks. The past week of living under the Cavallari roof had done little to diminish Mia's discomfort with their casual displays of wealth. Victoria dismissed Mia's objection with a gentle but firm smile that brooked no argument. Consider it practical rather than extravagant. You'll need appropriate attire to blend in at the gala, where you'll be introduced as my new private nurse and companion. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with San Francisco's elite, the annual benefit drawing together politicians, tech moguls, and old money families in a display of wealth thinly disguised as philanthropy. Mia felt painfully conspicuous despite the designer gown and professionally styled hair that transformed her external appearance. Remember, you're here as family tonight, Victoria murmured as they entered the event. Her arm linked through Mia's in a gesture that appeared affectionate, but served to guide the younger woman through the unfamiliar social terrain. The implicit protection in the gesture wasn't lost on Mia. Stefano materialized beside them with the silent efficiency that still unnerved Mia after a week in his household, his evening attire accentuating the dangerous elegance that set him apart, even in this gathering of powerful people. His hand settled briefly at the small of her back, ostensibly guiding her but effectively claiming her to the observing crowd. "Play along," he whispered against her ear, as he steered her toward a cluster of men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their predatory assessments of the room. "These are associates who expect to meet my mother's savior, and possibly her would-be killer." Mia's pulse quickened as understanding dawned. This wasn't merely a social obligation, but a deliberate move in whatever dangerous game the Cavallari family was playing. "You're using me as bait," she accused in a whispered hiss, maintaining her smile for the benefit of watching eyes. "I prefer to think of it as strategic positioning," Stefano countered smoothly, his grip on her waist tightening fractionally as they approached the waiting group. "Watch their reactions when I introduce you. Guilt leaves traces even the most practiced liar can't conceal." The introductions passed in a blur of unfamiliar names and calculating gazes. Mia's nerves stretched to breaking point as she searched for any sign of recognition or hostility among the assembled faces. She found herself leaning into Stefano's solid presence despite her earlier anger, instinctively seeking security in this unfamiliar territory. "May I borrow your lovely companion for a dance?" one of the men asked Stefano after the formalities concluded, his smile not quite reaching eyes that had assessed Mia with uncomfortable intensity throughout the introductions. The predatory edge to his courtesy raised goosebumps along her arms. "I'm afraid Ms. Sullivan has promised this dance to me," Stefano replied, with casual authority that concealed the steel beneath his words. Without waiting for a response, he guided Mia toward the dance floor with practiced ease that brooked no opposition. Mia found herself pulled into Stefano's arms as the orchestra began a waltz, his hand splayed possessively across her back as he guided her through steps she'd never learned, but somehow managed to follow under his lead. "That man, August Bianchi, has connections to every criminal enterprise in the city," he informed her, his lips close to her ear under the pretense of intimacy. "Including yours?" Mia challenged, the question slipping out before she could reconsider the wisdom of antagonizing the man currently responsible for her safety. The week spent in the Cavallari household had revealed glimpses of operations that certainly weren't legitimate business ventures. Stefano's laugh held genuine amusement, rather than offense at her boldness. "You're beginning to understand our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, spinning her gracefully before pulling her closer than strictly necessary for the dance. "Yes, including mine, which is precisely why he's a primary suspect." The morning after the gala, Mia woke to an empty house, the usual bustle of staff notably absent as she made her way through the silent corridors. A single note on the kitchen counter in Stefano's precise handwriting instructed her not to leave the property under any circumstances until his return. Her nursing instincts prickled with unease as she checked Victoria's suite, finding it similarly abandoned with signs of a hasty departure. An open jewelry box, closet doors ajar, and a half-finished cup of tea gone cold on the nightstand. The carefully maintained order of the Cavallari household had been disrupted by something urgent. Mia's phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. "We have what Cavallari values most. Come alone to Pier 38, Warehouse C. 1 hour." Attached was a photo of Victoria bound to a chair, the timestamp showing it had been taken just 20 minutes ago. Panic clawed at Mia's throat as she tried unsuccessfully to reach Stefano, each unanswered ring increasing her certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The security staff had vanished along with the family, leaving her isolated in the massive house with an impossible decision to make. "This is obviously a trap," she muttered to herself, pacing the marble floors of the entryway while clutching her phone like a lifeline. Yet the image of Victoria, the woman who had welcomed her without question and protected her from unnamed threats, compelled her toward a course of action that defied all logic. 47 minutes later, Mia stood before the weathered exterior of Warehouse C, the sound of lapping waves and distant foghorns creating an eerie soundtrack to what was almost certainly a catastrophic mistake. Her nursing scrubs, the only clothing that felt authentic to her in this situation, offered no protection against the biting wind off the bay, or whatever awaited inside. "Come in, Ms. Sullivan," a voice called from the partially open warehouse door, the casual confidence suggesting they had never doubted her appearance despite the absurdity of their demand. "Victoria Cavallari is quite anxious to see you. She's been most insistent about your special medical knowledge." Mia stepped into the cavernous space, momentarily blinded by the transition from bright morning sunlight to the dim interior illuminated only by dusty windows set high in the walls. The echo of her footsteps on concrete announced her presence more effectively than any introduction. As her eyes adjusted, she made out Victoria seated exactly as shown in the photo, flanked by two men whose expensive suits couldn't disguise their mercenary nature. A third man stood slightly apart, August Bianchi from the gala, his predatory smile now unleashed without the social constraints that had tempered it the previous evening. "You came alone. How touching," Bianchi observed, circling Mia like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Such loyalty to a family you barely know. Or perhaps it's something else drawing you to the Cavallaris." Mia ignored him, focusing instead on Victoria, whose composed expression revealed more strength than fear, despite her compromised position. "Are you hurt?" she asked directly, her medical training automatically assessing the visible signs of the older woman's condition. "Nothing serious, dear," Victoria replied with remarkable dignity, her eyes communicating something Mia couldn't quite interpret. "Though I believe Mr. Bianchi has questions about your remarkable ability to identify poisons, a talent that rather spectacularly ruined his careful plans at the opera." Bianchi's pleasant facade hardened as he grabbed Mia's arm, forcing her attention back to him with bruising pressure. "Indeed, a nursing student who miraculously recognizes thallium poisoning and appears with the perfect antidote seems rather suspicious, doesn't it?" "I don't know what you expect me to say," Mia responded, maintaining a calm she didn't feel as she catalogued potential improvised weapons within reach. The warehouse offered little beyond scattered shipping pallets and rusted equipment that had seen better decades. "The truth would be refreshing," Bianchi suggested with mock pleasantness, nodding to one of his men who produced a syringe filled with amber liquid. "Perhaps this will help clarify your memory, a special compound that loosens tongues quite effectively." Mia recognized the distinctive color of sodium pentothal mixed with a paralytic agent, her specialized knowledge once again revealing itself in the most dangerous possible context. "Truth serum with a neuromuscular blocker," she identified automatically, cursing herself immediately as Bianchi's expression transformed with renewed interest. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "You continue to confirm my suspicions about your unusual expertise, Ms. Sullivan. Expertise that extends well beyond standard nursing curriculum." The warehouse door crashed open before Bianchi could pursue his line of questioning further, the sudden intrusion accompanied by the unmistakable sound of gunfire and breaking glass. Mia dropped instinctively to the floor as chaos erupted around her, years of emergency drills in the hospital providing unexpected preparation for the violence. Stefano appeared through the haze of dust and confusion like an avenging angel, his movements fluid and lethal as he dispatched the nearest guard with terrifying efficiency. His eyes found Mia first, a momentary assessment confirming she remained unharmed before he turned his attention to his mother. The Cavallari family doctor finished examining Mia's bruised wrist, pronouncing her physically unharmed despite the morning's traumatic events. The study where he conducted his examination offered no windows to the outside world, reinforcing the sense of isolation that had characterized her past weeks in this household. "You shouldn't have gone to the warehouse," Stefano stated flatly once they were alone, his earlier concern now replaced by cold anger as he paced the perimeter of the room. The controlled violence she had witnessed hours earlier remained evident in the tightly coiled tension of his movements. Mia lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to apologize for attempting to save his mother when she believed he had abandoned them both. "I made the only choice I could with the information I had," she countered, exhaustion making her voice sharper than intended. "A choice that nearly got you killed," Stefano snapped, halting his pacing to fix her with an intensity that would have intimidated her weeks ago. Now, having seen the lengths to which he would go to protect his family, she found herself strangely unmoved by his display of temper. "Your mother could have died while you were... where exactly?" Mia challenged, rising from her chair to confront him directly. "You disappeared without explanation, leaving us vulnerable while you were handling whatever business is more important than family safety." Stefano's expression shifted at her words, something almost like respect flickering across his features before he mastered it. "I was meeting with the heads of the other families, securing their support against Bianchi's attempted coup," he explained with unexpected candor. "Other families? You mean other criminal organizations?" Mia clarified, no longer pretending ignorance about the nature of the Cavallari enterprise. The weeks spent under their protection had provided ample evidence of activities that existed well outside legal boundaries. Stefano neither confirmed nor denied her assessment, studying her with renewed interest as he considered her directness. "You've shown remarkable adaptability to our world, Mia Sullivan," he observed, using her full name in a way that somehow felt more intimate than casual address would have been. "I've adapted to survive," she corrected him, unwilling to accept his implied approval of her assimilation into their dangerous reality. "But that doesn't mean I belong here, or that I can stay once Victoria no longer needs medical monitoring." Something flashed in Stefano's eyes at her words, disappointment or perhaps challenge, before he closed the distance between them with deliberate steps. "And where exactly do you think you can go that Bianchi won't find you?" he asked, his voice lowered to a dangerous murmur. "He wanted me because of my connection to your family," Mia pointed out logically, refusing to retreat despite his proximity. "Remove that connection, and I become irrelevant to whatever power struggle is happening in your world. Is that what you think happened today?" Stefano asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone as he studied her with the intensity that still made her heart rate accelerate despite her best efforts at detachment. "That Bianchi targeted you merely as leverage against me?" Confusion flickered across Mia's features as she processed his question, uncertainty replacing her earlier conviction. "Why else would he be interested in a nursing student with no connections or resources?" she asked, genuine bewilderment evident in her voice. "Because you recognized a poison that most medical professionals wouldn't identify without extensive testing," Stefano replied, watching her reaction carefully as he continued. "Because you knew the exact antidote and how to administer it without hesitation or reference materials." Mia felt the blood drain from her face as his implication became clear. Stefano had never stopped investigating her background or questioning her story about toxicology training. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her throat suddenly dry as the conversation ventured into territory she had carefully avoided for 3 years. "I'm suggesting that Bianchi recognized what I suspected from the beginning," Stefano answered, his gaze never leaving her face as he delivered his theory. "Your knowledge of poisons isn't academic, Mia. It's personal, intimate, and born from experience rather than textbooks." The truth Mia had buried beneath layers of careful fabrication threatened to surface under his relentless scrutiny. Memories of her mother's slow, agonizing death at the hands of a stepfather whose patience had finally run out. 3 years of research, of obsessively learning to identify the poisons that had stolen her mother gradually enough to avoid suspicion, all of it exposed by a chance encounter at an opera house. "My mother was poisoned 3 years ago," Mia finally confessed as dawn broke over the San Francisco skyline, the night spent in painful revelations leaving her emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. "My stepfather administered increasing doses of arsenic over months, making it look like a wasting disease while collecting her life insurance." Stefano remained silent beside her on the terrace, offering the rare gift of undivided attention without judgment as she unburdened herself of secrets long held close. The morning light softened his features, revealing a complexity she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge until now. "I couldn't prove it. The autopsy was inconclusive, and he was careful to dispose of evidence," she continued, her fingers absently tracing the pattern of the locket containing her mother's photo. "So I decided to learn everything I could about poisons, determined that I would recognize the signs if I ever encountered them again. And then, you walked into Box 7 and saved my mother from a similar fate." Stefano observed quietly, the coincidence or destiny of their meeting hanging between them unanswered. He reached for her hand, the gesture tentative in a way that seemed at odds with his usual confidence. Victoria found them still on the terrace an hour later, her keen eyes missing nothing about their linked hands or the emotional intimacy evident in their posture. "I see you've finally stopped circling each other like wary predators," she commented with maternal satisfaction, joining them at the railing overlooking the bay. "Mia has shared her story," Stefano explained simply, the loaded statement conveying volumes about newfound trust that Victoria seemed to understand without further elaboration. The unspoken communication between mother and son reminded Mia painfully of what she had lost. "Then, perhaps it's time we share ours completely," Victoria suggested, her gaze shifting to Mia with unexpected vulnerability. "The Cavallari family has existed in shadows for generations, but shadows can provide cover for transformation as well as concealment." Mia listened in growing amazement as Victoria outlined her long-standing efforts to gradually shift the family's interest toward legitimate enterprises, efforts that had earned her powerful enemies within the old guard, including Bianchi. The poisoning had been as much about stopping this evolution as eliminating a powerful matriarch. "My son has been my reluctant ally in this transformation," Victoria explained with obvious pride, her hand resting briefly on Stefano's shoulder. "Each legitimate business we establish reduces our dependence on the old ways, but change comes slowly in our world." Stefano's expression revealed the complex burden he carried, honor-bound to protect the family legacy, while simultaneously working to transform it into something he could eventually take pride in. His eyes sought Mia's, silently gauging her reaction to this revelation. "The medical foundation we're establishing needs a director with your unique combination of medical knowledge and personal conviction," Victoria continued, watching Mia closely as she presented an opportunity that seemed tailored precisely to bridge the chasm between Mia's world and theirs. "A foundation funded by money from illegal operations?" Mia questioned, unable to ignore the moral complexity despite her attraction to both the offer and the man beside her. Her principles had defined her for too long to be casually discarded, regardless of her growing feelings. "Funded by our legitimate holdings, which now represent 60% of our total assets," Stefano clarified, his business acumen evident in the precise figure. "The foundation itself will be completely transparent, subject to the strictest oversight and compliance standards." Mia considered the proposal, weighing the opportunity to create something meaningful from tragedy against the complicated reality of the Cavallari family's dual existence. "I would need complete autonomy in medical decisions," she stated, surprising herself with the implicit acceptance underlying her conditional response. "Absolutely," Victoria agreed without hesitation, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she watched understanding develop between Mia and her son. "The foundation will focus on identifying and treating victims of poisoning who might otherwise go undiagnosed, cases like your mother's that slip through conventional medical screening." 3 months later, Mia stood in the lobby of the newly established Sullivan Cavallari Medical Research Center, watching as the plaque bearing her mother's name was unveiled to polite applause from San Francisco's elite. The journey from struggling nursing student to foundation director still felt surreal at times, a transformation as profound as the one the Cavallari family was undergoing. Stefano appeared at her side as the ceremony concluded, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity that had developed between them during the intense months of planning. "Your mother would be proud," he murmured, understanding the bittersweet nature of this triumph better than anyone else could. "Box 7 at the Golden Gate Opera House has been permanently reserved in your name," Stefano added, as they walked toward the reception, the significance of the location where their worlds had collided not lost on either of them. "Victoria insists we use it for the season opening next month. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying these tales of unexpected love and transformation, write in the comments which part of the world you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps these stories coming." The crystal chandelier above our table caught the light in fragments, scattering tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. I traced one with my fingertip, focusing on the colors rather than on Mark's voice, which had taken on that familiar edge, the one that appeared whenever we were in public. "Emma, for God's sake, can you at least pretend to have an opinion?" He sighed, swirling the wine in his glass with practiced precision. "The waiters asked you twice what you want." I looked up, startled to find the waiter standing beside our table, pen poised above his small notepad. How long had he been there? The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. La Riviera was Mark's choice, always Mark's choice, with its white tablecloths and waiters in bow ties who seemed to materialize and vanish like well-dressed ghosts. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my cheeks burning. "I'll have the salmon, please." "The salmon," Mark repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "The same thing you ordered last time, and the time before that." He smiled at the waiter. "She has the culinary imagination of a 5-year-old. The waiter's expression remained carefully neutral, though I thought I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes before he nodded and slipped away. Humiliation coiled in my stomach, tight and familiar. I reached for my water glass with trembling fingers. "I like the salmon here," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "What you like is being boring and predictable." Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We're having dinner with the Harringtons next week. My future depends on that partnership, Em. You need to be more, present, engaging. Sometimes I think I'm dining with a ghost." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This was our ritual now, his disappointment. My apologies. When had it started? Somewhere between the eager yes to his proposal 6 months ago and the gradual realization that the diamond on my finger felt increasingly like a shackle rather than a promise. It hadn't always been this way. In the beginning, Mark had been charmed by my quietness, had called me his thoughtful angel. Now that angel had become a burden, weighing down his ascent in the cutthroat world of corporate law. The restaurant buzzed around us, conversations and laughter swelling and receding like waves. I let my gaze drift past Mark's shoulder. Seeking a momentary escape, that's when I saw him. He sat alone at a corner table, partially obscured by a tasteful arrangement of orchids. But even in that shadowed corner, he commanded attention. Not by demanding it, like Mark, but by seeming utterly indifferent to it. Dark hair, impeccably styled, a suit that whispered wealth rather than shouted it, strong hands wrapped around a tumbler of amber liquid. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up. The air between us seemed to crackle with sudden electricity. His eyes were dark, so dark I couldn't distinguish pupil from iris, and they held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. There was something almost predatory in that gaze, something that should have made me look away immediately. I didn't. "Are you even listening to me?" Mark's sharp voice severed the connection. I blinked, turning back to him. "Sorry, I was just daydreaming again." He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip just tight enough to hurt. "Look, I know you're nervous about the wedding, but I need you focused, Emma. My career is at a critical point." A subtle movement caught my eye. A man in a dark suit had appeared at the corner table, leaning down to whisper something to the stranger. The stranger nodded once, never taking his eyes from our table. No, not our table. From me. "You should wear the blue dress to the Harringtons," Mark continued. "The black makes you look washed out, and frankly, you need all the help you can get. Maybe schedule a hair appointment too." Each word landed like a tiny dart. I used to deflect them, used to believe I was imagining the cruelty beneath his helpful suggestions. Now I just absorbed them silently, collecting wounds like souvenirs. "Mark," I said, my voice stronger than I expected, "do you even want to marry me anymore?" His expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance. "What kind of question is that? We've got the venue booked, the invitation sent." He squeezed my hand harder. "Cold feet are normal, Em, but let's not do this here." "That's not an answer." The words escaped before I could stop them. Mark's face hardened. "You're being ridiculous. Again." Our food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. The salmon gleamed pink and perfect on my plate, but my appetite had vanished. I picked up my fork anyway, going through the motions. "I've been thinking," Mark said between precise bites of his steak. "Maybe you should consider quitting that library job after the wedding. It barely pays anything, and honestly, it's not like you need the—" "No." The word burst from me, surprising us both. Mark set down his fork. "Excuse me?" I said no. I'm not quitting my job. My heart hammered against my ribs. But something had shifted inside me. Perhaps it was the weight of all the tiny cruelties, finally becoming too heavy to bear. Or perhaps it was the lingering sensation of those dark eyes watching me from across the room, seeing me in a way Mark never had. Your job shelving books is hardly a career, Emma. Be realistic. Those books saved me after my parents died, I said, my voice low but steady. That library was the only place that felt like home. Mark rolled his eyes. God, you're always so dramatic about your parents. It's been 8 years. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt something crack inside me, some final thread of hope that the man I'd fallen in love with still existed beneath this polished, cruel stranger. I pushed my chair back. I need a moment. Emma, don't make a scene. But I was already moving, threading my way through the tables toward the restrooms at the back of the restaurant. My vision blurred with unshed tears as I pushed through the door marked, "Ladies," grateful to find it empty. I gripped the marble counter, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Pale face, wide blue eyes rimmed with smudged mascara. I barely recognized myself. "What are you doing?" I whispered to my reflection. "Why are you still with him?" I knew the answer, though I hated to admit it. Fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over at 28. Fear that Mark was right, that I was too quiet, too dull, too damaged to be loved properly. I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to ruin what remained of my makeup. I couldn't hide in here forever. Mark would be getting impatient, and an impatient Mark meant a cutting Mark. I dried my hands and took a deep breath, preparing my apology. When I emerged, I nearly collided with a broad chest. "Excuse me," I murmured, stepping back. No need to apologize. The voice was deep, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. I looked up and felt my breath catch. It was him. The man from the corner table. Up close, he was even more striking. Strong jawline dusted with perfect stubble. Those same dark, fathomless eyes. A scar, thin and white, tracing the edge of his left eyebrow. A small distance behind him stood the man in the dark suit I'd noticed earlier. His posture alert, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "Are you all right?" the stranger asked. The question, asked with such quiet intensity, almost undid me. When was the last time anyone had asked me that and actually wanted the truth? "I'm fine," I said automatically. Just needed a moment. His eyes, so dark they were almost black, studied my face. "He doesn't deserve your tears." My heart stuttered. I don't know what you mean." A small, knowing smile curved his lips. "I think you do." He reached into his jacket and produced a crisp white handkerchief. "You missed a spot," he said, gesturing to the corner of my eye. I took it, our fingers brushing. An electric current seemed to pass between us, making my skin tingle. "Thank you," I whispered. "Dominic," he said, not a question, an offering. "His name?" "Emma," I replied. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Interest. "Emma," he repeated as if tasting the word. "It suits you." I should have excused myself then. Should have returned to Mark. Should have forgotten this strange, charged moment in a restaurant hallway with a dangerous-looking stranger. Instead, I stood frozen, caught in Dominic's gravity. "Your fiancé is coming," he said suddenly, though he hadn't glanced away from my face. Sure enough, I heard Mark's irritated voice calling my name from the dining room. "I should go," I said, clutching the handkerchief. Dominic stepped aside, but as I moved past him, he spoke again, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "A man who truly values a woman doesn't diminish her in public or in private." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing through a door marked private that I hadn't noticed before. I stood there, his words echoing in my mind, until Mark rounded the corner. "What are you doing back here? Our food's getting cold." He grabbed my elbow, steering me back toward our table. "I swear, Emma, sometimes it's like you go out of your way to embarrass me." I let him lead me, but something had changed. I felt it in the straight line of my spine, in the steady beat of my heart, as if the brief encounter with Dominic had awakened something I'd kept buried for too long. We returned to our table. My salmon sat untouched, no longer appealing. Mark resumed eating as if nothing had happened, launching into a story about his latest courtroom victory. I nodded at appropriate intervals, but my attention kept drifting to the corner table. It was empty now. A waiter appeared at my elbow, refilling my water glass. "Compliments of the gentleman," he said quietly, placing a folded napkin beside my plate before gliding away. I waited until Mark was distracted by his phone before unfolding it. Inside, written in bold, elegant script, "Your cage has a door, little bird. The question is whether you're brave enough to fly." No signature. None needed. I refolded the napkin and slipped it into my purse, my heart racing. When I looked up, Mark was watching me, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "What was that?" he demanded. "Just a napkin," I said. I spilled some water. He stared at me a moment longer, then shook his head. "Finish your food. We need to get going." I picked up my fork and took a small bite of salmon, no longer tasting it. My mind was filled with dark eyes and that strange, charged moment in the hallway. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Mark paid the bill, complaining about the price. As we stood to leave, his hand possessive on the small of my back, I cast one last glance around the restaurant. In a shadowed corner near the bar, I glimpsed Dominic. He was speaking to an older man who listened with deference, nodding frequently. Several men in dark suits hovered nearby. Even from across the room, I could feel the power radiating from him. Not the brittle, performative authority Mark wielded, but something deeper, more dangerous. As if feeling my gaze, Dominic looked up. Our eyes locked for the second time that night. He raised his glass in a subtle toast, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Mark's grip tightened on my waist. "Come on," he muttered. "Stop gawking." We were almost at the door when a commotion behind us made us turn. A waiter had tripped, sending a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. Mark snorted with derision, but I froze, my eyes widening. Because in the chaos, I saw what no one else seemed to notice. The accident had occurred right in front of Dominic's table, blocking the path of a man who had been heading directly toward us, a man whose hand had been reaching inside his jacket. Now that man was being quietly but firmly escorted toward the kitchen by two of Dominic's suits. A chill ran down my spine. What had just happened? "Let's go," Mark said, oblivious, pulling me through the door into the cool night air. As we stepped outside, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver's window lowered, revealing the face of the man who had been standing guard behind Dominic earlier. He nodded once at me, his expression impassive before driving away. "Crazy traffic tonight," Mark muttered, flagging down a taxi. I said nothing, my mind reeling. Who was Dominic? What had I stumbled into with that simple, fateful glance across a crowded restaurant? The taxi arrived. Mark opened the door, then turned to me with impatience. "Well? Are you getting in, or what?" I hesitated, one foot on the curb, one in the street. In that moment, I felt suspended between two lives. The safe, predictable prison I knew, and something wild and unknown. Dominic's words echoed in my mind. "Your cage has a door, little bird." But before I could decide, before I could even draw breath, another black car screeched to a halt beside us. The back door flew open, and suddenly Mark was on the ground, blood trickling from his nose, and Dominic was standing over him, his expression coldly furious. "You don't speak to her that way," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Not ever again." Mark scrambled backward, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Who the hell are you?" Dominic ignored him, turning to me. In the harsh glow of the streetlight, he looked like something from another world, dangerous and beautiful and utterly terrifying. "Emma," he said, his voice gentler now, "I think it's time you made a choice." He extended his hand toward me as people froze on the sidewalk around us, as Mark sputtered threats about calling the police, as my heart thundered in my chest. "He doesn't deserve you," Dominic said quietly. "Come with me." I stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that whatever I decided next would change everything forever. Time seemed to stand still on that sidewalk. Behind me, A taxi idled with its door open. Before me, Dominic's hand remained extended, an invitation or perhaps a dare. And at my feet, Mark was scrambling to his knees, blood trickling from his nose, his face twisted with rage and fear. "Emma, don't be stupid," Mark spat, his voice nasal from the blow. "You don't know who this man is." I didn't. Not really. But in that moment, I realized I didn't know who Mark was anymore either. Or perhaps I finally saw who he had been all along. "Sir." A deep voice came from behind Dominic. One of his men stood there, gesturing subtly toward the street. "We need to move." Dominic's eyes never left mine. "Your choice, Emma. But it needs to be now." My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to step back, to apologize to Mark, to retreat into the cage I knew. But another part of me, a part buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed, whispered that some cages were worse than the unknown. I reached out and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong. Something flashed in his eyes, triumph, relief. I couldn't tell. Without a word, he guided me toward the waiting car. "You're making a huge mistake," Mark shouted, his voice cracking. "Emma, I'll call the police." Dominic paused, turning back to Mark with a look that made my blood run cold. That would be unwise. The words were soft, almost gentle, yet carried a threat so palpable it seemed to electrify the air. The man I'd been planning to marry fell silent, his face draining of color. Dominic guided me into the car's plush leather back seat before sliding in beside me. The door closed with a soft, expensive thunk. Inside, the world became instantly muted, the soundproofing so complete that the chaos of the street scene disappeared as if someone had pressed mute on a television. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding into the flow of traffic. I stared at my hands, now trembling in my lap. What had I done? "You're safe," Dominic said, as if reading my thoughts. "I won't hurt you." I looked up at him. In the dim interior of the car, shadows played across his face, accentuating the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. "Who are you?" I whispered. A small smile curved his lips. "You already know my name." "That's not what I meant." His smile faded. He studied me for a long moment as if deciding something. "I'm someone who recognizes value when others don't," he finally said. "Someone who doesn't like to see beautiful things damaged." A chill ran down my spine, not from fear, though perhaps it should have been, but from the way his eyes seemed to see through all my carefully constructed walls. "You assaulted my fiancé," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Former fiancé," he corrected. "And yes, I did." "Are you upset about that?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. Was I upset? I should have been outraged, horrified. Instead, I felt nothing. No, that wasn't quite true. I felt relief. The realization shamed me. "I don't know," I admitted. Dominic nodded, seeming satisfied with my honesty. He turned to look out the window, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. The city lights streaked past, blurring like watercolors. I didn't recognize the neighborhood we were entering. Sleek high-rises and exclusive boutiques replacing the familiar landmarks of my daily life. Everything about this situation screamed danger. I'd gotten into a car with a stranger. A man who had just assaulted Mark without hesitation. A man surrounded by what could only be described as bodyguards. Yet somehow, I felt calmer than I had in months. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Somewhere we can talk properly." His eyes returned to mine. "I have a penthouse nearby, but if that makes you uncomfortable, we can go elsewhere." The offer of choice surprised me. "Why are you doing this?" He was silent for so long that I thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I saw something in you. Something familiar." "What?" A prisoner who had forgotten the door was unlocked. He leaned slightly closer, his scent enveloping me, expensive cologne with notes of sandalwood and something darker, more primal. "I've been there, Emma. Long ago." The car slowed, turning into a private driveway beneath a towering luxury building. A security guard nodded respectfully as we passed, raising a gate without question. "We're here," Dominic said. "My home. But the choice remains yours. Say the word, and my driver will take you anywhere you want to go." I should have asked to be taken home. Back to the small apartment I shared with Mark. Back to the life I knew, broken as it was. Instead, I heard myself say, "I want to talk." Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. He nodded once. The car stopped, and his door was opened by one of his men, the same one who had been standing guard at the restaurant. The night air was cool against my skin as I followed Dominic into a private elevator, its interior lined with mirrors and soft golden light. His bodyguard remained outside, taking a different elevator. As we ascended, I caught my reflection. Cheeks flushed, eyes wide, still wearing the navy dress Mark had deemed acceptable for tonight's dinner. Standing next to Dominic's imposing figure, I looked small, fragile. His eyes met mine in the mirror, having second thoughts. About 50 of them, I admitted. He laughed then, the sound surprisingly warm. Honesty, refreshing. The elevator opened directly into a foyer of creamy marble and subtle lighting. Beyond it stretched a vast living space with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a panoramic view of the city lights below. The space was elegant but masculine. Leather, steel, and dark wood dominating the color scheme. "Make yourself comfortable," Dominic said, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over a chair. Beneath it, his crisp white shirt stretched across broad shoulders. A shoulder holster held what was unmistakably a gun. I froze, my eyes fixed on the weapon. "I should have warned you," he said, following my gaze. He removed the holster with practiced ease, setting it on a shelf near the entrance. "Better?" I nodded, though my heart still raced. This was madness. I should leave immediately. Yet I found myself moving further into the apartment, drawn to the breathtaking view. The city sprawled below like a carpet of jewels, familiar yet strange from this height. How different the world looked from up here, above it all. "Would you like a drink?" Dominic asked, moving to a bar area tucked against one wall. "Water, please." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He poured water into a crystal glass for me and scotch for himself, then gestured toward a seating area near the windows. I perched on the edge of a leather sofa, cradling my water between my palms. Dominic sat across from me, his movements fluid and controlled. He didn't crowd me or try to sit too close, a courtesy that paradoxically made me even more aware of his presence. "You have questions," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "A million of them." I took a sip of water. "Let's start with the obvious. Are you involved in organized crime?" He raised an eyebrow, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Straight to the point. I like that." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I have business interests in many sectors. Some operate in gray areas." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now." His eyes held mine. "But I promise you this. You are in no danger from me, ever." Something in his voice, an intensity, a sincerity, made me believe him, against all logic. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since our eyes first met across the restaurant. "Why did you intervene?" Dominic set his glass down, leaning forward slightly. "The first time I saw you, you were looking at your reflection in that spoon." I blinked, confused. "What?" "At the restaurant, before you noticed me. You picked up your spoon and looked at your reflection." "And do you know what I saw?" He paused. "I saw you practice your smile. 3 times, like you were trying to get it right, like you needed to be prepared." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I had done that. An old habit from childhood, preparing myself for social situations that always made me anxious. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed. "Then he spoke to you," Dominic continued, his voice hardening. "I watched your light dim with every word. I've seen that look before, on my mother's face years ago, when my father would criticize her at the dinner table." His jaw tightened. "I was too young to stop it then." I swallowed hard. "So, what? I'm some kind of rescue project? A chance to save someone like your mother?" "No." The word was sharp, definitive. "You're nothing like her. She never fought back." His eyes held mine. "But you were starting to. I saw it in your eyes when you questioned him about the wedding. You just needed someone to see your worth." I looked away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. You don't know me. I know enough. He leaned back, giving me space again. I know you work at a library. A job you love for reasons beyond money. I know you lost your parents 8 years ago. I know you've been slowly disappearing inside that relationship. My head snapped up. How do you know all that? I listened. At the restaurant. A small, almost apologetic smile. I have good hearing. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the comfortable temperature of the room. This is a lot. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Taking control of your life perhaps for the first time, Dominic suggested quietly, making a choice that wasn't safe or expected. His words struck a chord so deep within me that I almost gasped. Wasn't that exactly what I'd done? For years, I'd made the safe choice, the expected choice. After my parents' death, I'd clung to routine and predictability like a lifeline. Mark had seemed like the safest choice of all. Stable, successful, certain of his place in the world. When had safe become suffocating? I should call someone, I said suddenly. My friend Lisa will be worried when she hears what happened. Of course. Dominic retrieved my purse from where I'd set it down and handed it to me. Use my phone if you prefer. Your fiancé might try tracking yours. The thought hadn't occurred to me, and the fact that it had occurred to him was both concerning and oddly comforting. I took out my own phone anyway, seeing 3 missed calls from Mark, and a barrage of texts ranging from furious demands to return home immediately to bizarre apologies mixed with threats. My finger hovered over Lisa's contact information, but I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I left Mark at a restaurant after a stranger punched him, and now I'm in that stranger's penthouse. It sounded insane even in my head. I set the phone down without calling. Second thoughts? Dominic asked. More like 15th thoughts. I managed a small, shaky laugh. This doesn't feel real. Reality has a way of surprising us. He stood and moved to the window, looking out over the city. Sometimes opportunities appear when we least expect them, disguised as impossible choices. He glanced back at me. Sometimes freedom feels like falling. I joined him at the window, keeping a careful distance between us. From this height, the cars below looked like toys, the people like ants. How easy it would be to feel like a god up here, removed from the concerns of ordinary life. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That depends on you. Dominic turned to face me fully. I can have my driver take you anywhere you want to go. Your home, a hotel, a friend's house, or you can stay in my guest suite tonight, with the door locked from the inside, and decide your next move in the morning. I studied his face, searching for deceit or hidden motives. I found none, only that same intense focus that had first caught my attention across the restaurant. Why would you offer that? You don't know me either. Perhaps I'd like to. His voice was low, almost intimate, sending a shiver down my spine. Or perhaps I simply recognized someone at a crossroads. I've stood there myself. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dominic moved to answer it, speaking briefly with one of his men before returning with a sleek leather overnight bag. Some essentials, he explained. Toiletries, night clothes, a change of clothes for tomorrow. My assistant is quite efficient. I raised an eyebrow. Your assistant keeps women's clothing on hand? For the first time, Dominic looked almost embarrassed. She purchased them just now. I texted her your size. How did you know my size? I pay attention. He set the bag down. The guest suite is through there if you decide to stay. The door locks as I mentioned. The kitchen is fully stocked if you're hungry. I glanced toward the doorway he'd indicated, then back at him. If I stay, what do you want from me? Dominic's expression grew serious. Nothing you don't choose to give freely. He took a step closer, not touching me but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I want to know you, Emma, the real you, not the ghost that man was turning you into. His words stripped me bare, exposing nerves I'd thought long numbed. And if there's nothing to know, if that ghost is all that's left. I don't believe that. His voice was soft but certain. I saw you, remember? Before you noticed me. I saw your strength when you finally stood up to him. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Another call from Mark. Dominic glanced at it, then back to me. "Stay tonight," he said. "As my guest, nothing more. In the morning, if you want to return to him, I won't stop you. And if I don't want to return to him," something flickered in his eyes, something possessive, almost predatory, "then perhaps we can discuss other arrangements." I should have been frightened by that look. Instead, I felt a rush of heat that had nothing to do with fear. "I'll stay," I heard myself say. "Just for tonight." Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "The right choice, I think." He gestured toward the guest suite. "Make yourself comfortable. I have some business to attend to, but I'll be here if you need anything." I picked up the overnight bag and moved toward the doorway, pausing to look back at him. "Dominic?" "Yes." "Thank you for seeing me." Something softened in his expression, a vulnerability I hadn't expected to see in such a powerful man. "Always, Emma, from the first moment," as I closed the guest room door behind me, sliding the lock into place with a reassuring click. I leaned against it and took a deep breath. What had I done? What strange twist of fate had led me here, to this luxurious room in a stranger's home, having abandoned the future I'd been building for years? The bedroom was as elegant as the rest of the penthouse, a king-sized bed with crisp white linens, more floor-to-ceiling windows with the same spectacular view, an ensuite bathroom gleaming with marble and chrome. I set the bag on a bench at the foot of the bed and slowly sank down beside it. For the first time in hours, I was alone with my thoughts. They should have been chaotic, panicked. Instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity, as if emerging from deep water into sudden, brilliant sunlight. I'd been drowning by inches in my relationship with Mark, each day disappearing a little more beneath the weight of his expectations and disappointments. Tonight, I'd chosen to save myself. I opened the overnight bag to find everything I might need: silk pajamas that looked close to my size, toiletries in expensive packaging, even a simple dress and undergarments for tomorrow, all tasteful, nothing presumptuous or overly intimate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lisa. "Mark just called me, totally freaking out. Said you left with some guy from the restaurant? Are you okay? Call me." I hesitated, then typed, "I'm safe. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Please don't worry." Setting the phone aside, I moved to the window and looked out at the glittering cityscape. Somewhere out there was my apartment, my job, my carefully constructed life. And here I was, in a stranger's penthouse, feeling more alive than I had in years. "What are you doing, Emma?" I whispered to my reflection in the glass. The woman who stared back looked different somehow. Eyes brighter, posture straighter, like someone waking from a long sleep. Whatever happened tomorrow, one thing was certain. I wouldn't be the same person who had walked into that restaurant tonight. For better or worse, something had changed. Something fundamental and irreversible. Outside the locked door, I heard Dominic moving about the apartment, his voice a low murmur as he spoke on the phone. A man I barely knew, yet who had somehow seen me more clearly in one evening than Mark had in 2 years. I turned away from the window and began to get ready for bed, knowing sleep would likely elude me. Tomorrow would bring consequences, decisions, reality. But for tonight, in this strange, suspended moment between my old life and whatever came next, I allowed myself to simply breathe. For tonight, that was enough. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the guest room in a golden glow. For a moment, I lay disoriented, the silk sheets and unfamiliar ceiling confusing me. Then reality rushed back. The restaurant, Mark's humiliation, Dominic's offer, my choice. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding as I took in my surroundings in the clear light of day. What had seemed like a dream last night, this luxurious room in a stranger's penthouse, was undeniably real. My phone on the nightstand showed 15 missed calls from Mark and a flurry of increasingly desperate texts. "Emma, this is insane. Come home now. Do you have any idea who that man is?" "I've called the police. This is kidnapping." The last message made me freeze. Had Mark really gone to the police? I hadn't been kidnapped. I'd gone willingly. But how would that look to outsiders? A soft knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Emma?" Dominic's voice, low and measured. "There's coffee and breakfast when you're ready. No rush." "Thank you," I called back, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "I'll be out soon." I showered quickly in the marble bathroom, the water pressure perfect, and the expensive toiletries leaving my skin scented with jasmine. The dress from the overnight bag fit well, a simple navy wrap dress that was both modest and flattering. I brushed my hair with the provided brush, applied minimal makeup, and took a deep breath before unlocking the door. The penthouse looked different in daylight, less intimidating, though no less impressive. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting details I'd missed last night: artwork on the walls, books lining built-in shelves, a few personal photographs in silver frames. Dominic stood at the kitchen island, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. No jacket, no visible weapon today. He looked up as I entered, his dark eyes assessing me with that same intensity I remembered from last night. "You slept well?" he asked, pouring coffee into a mug and offering it to me. "Better than I expected," I admitted, accepting the coffee and inhaling its rich aroma. "Thank you for the clothes and things," he nodded, gesturing toward the dining table where an assortment of breakfast foods waited: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs. "Help yourself. You must be hungry." I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. We sat across from each other at the table, the silence surprisingly comfortable, as I ate a croissant and sipped the excellent coffee. "Mark's been texting me," I finally said. "He says he called the police." Dominic didn't look concerned. "He's bluffing. A man like him wouldn't want the scrutiny." "What do you mean?" "I had my people look into him last night." Dominic's voice was casual, but his eyes were watchful. "Your fiancé has some creative accounting practices at his law firm. Nothing that would interest me, but certainly something he wouldn't want discovered during a police investigation." I set my coffee down, unsettled. "You investigated him." "I investigate everyone who might be a threat." He held my gaze. "It's necessary in my position." There it was again, that subtle reference to who he was, what he did. I gathered my courage and asked directly, "Are you going to tell me what that position is exactly? Why you have bodyguards and can investigate people overnight?" Dominic considered me for a long moment. "I run various businesses in this city. Some legitimate, some in gray areas, as I mentioned. I have enemies. I take precautions." His expression softened slightly. "But none of that should concern you." "It does concern me if I'm sitting in your apartment while the police might be looking for me." "No one is looking for you, Emma." His certainty was both reassuring and unnerving. "But if you're worried, call your friend. Lisa, was it? Let her know you're safe. You can meet her somewhere public if that would make you feel better." The suggestion surprised me. I'd half expected him to try to keep me isolated. "I can leave?" Something like hurt flashed in his eyes, quickly masked. "You were never a prisoner here, Emma. I told you last night, this is your choice." I nodded slowly, processing his words. "I should call Lisa. And I need to figure out what to do about everything." "About Mark, you mean?" "Yes." I traced the rim of my coffee cup with my fingertip. "I can't go back to him. I knew that even before last night, I think. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Dominic's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flash of satisfaction in his eyes. "You have somewhere to stay? Friends? Family?" "Lisa would take me in." I hesitated. "I'll need to get my things from the apartment." "I can have someone accompany you," he offered immediately, "to ensure there are no complications." The idea of returning to the apartment I'd shared with Mark made my stomach twist with anxiety. Having someone with me, someone connected to Dominic, would make it less frightening, but it would also deepen my connection to this man I barely knew, this man who clearly operated outside the boundaries of normal society. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I think Lisa can come with me. Mark's usually at work during the day." Dominic nodded, though I sensed he wasn't entirely pleased. "As you wish." He reached into his pocket and produced a business card, sliding it across the table to me. It was simple. Just his name and a phone number, no company or title. "Call this number any time, day or night." I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. That same electric current from last night passed between us, making my breath catch. Thank you for everything. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. This isn't goodbye, Emma. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, I don't think it is. Something like relief softened his features. Good. A discreet knock at the door broke the moment. One of Dominic's men entered after his acknowledgement. They spoke briefly in what sounded like Italian before the man nodded and withdrew. I apologize, Dominic said, rising from the table. Business that can't wait. Michael will drive you wherever you need to go when you're ready. Michael? My driver. He can be trusted completely. I nodded, feeling a strange reluctance to leave despite the uncertainty of my situation. I should get going. Lisa will be worried. Dominic walked me to the door, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow made me more aware of him than if he'd stood closer. Emma, he said as I was about to leave, remember what I said last night. You're worth more than he ever recognized. His words warmed something inside me that had been cold for too long. I'm starting to believe that. A smile. Genuine. Transforming his serious face. Good. That's the first step. Michael, the driver from last night, waited beside the elevator. He was younger than I'd realized, perhaps in his early 30s, with a quiet competence about him. He nodded politely as Dominic introduced us. Take Ms. Bennett wherever she wishes to go, Dominic instructed. Ensure she arrives safely. Of course, sir. I stepped into the elevator, turning to face Dominic one last time. He stood in the doorway of his penthouse, powerful and enigmatic, watching me with those dark, intense eyes. I'll call you, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. He nodded once, satisfaction evident in his expression. I know. The elevator doors closed, and I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Less than 24 hours had passed since our eyes had met across that restaurant, yet everything had changed. I felt like a different person, both more vulnerable and somehow stronger than I'd been yesterday. Michael maintained a respectful silence as we descended to the garage below the building. The same sleek black car from last night waited, its engine purring to life as we approached. Where to, Ms. Bennett? Michael asked as he held the door open for me. I gave him Lisa's address, settling into the plush leather seat. As we pulled out of the garage into the bright morning sun, I felt a curious mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. For the first time in years, my future was unwritten. My phone buzzed. Lisa again. Emma. Call me right now, or I'm filing a missing persons report. I dialed her number, bracing myself for her reaction. Emma. Oh my God, are you okay? Where are you? Her voice was frantic with worry. I'm fine, Lisa. Better than fine, actually. I'm on my way to your place. Can I stay with you for a few days? Of course you can. But what the hell happened? Mark is losing his mind. He showed up at my door at midnight looking for you. I glanced at Michael, who was studiously focusing on driving, giving me the illusion of privacy. It's a long story. I'll explain everything when I get there. Are you really okay? Her voice softened with concern. You sound different. I am different. I watched the city pass by outside the window. I finally woke up. After hanging up, I sat quietly, trying to organize my thoughts. How could I explain what had happened to Lisa? How could I make sense of it myself? I'd left my fiancé and spent the night in a stranger's penthouse, a stranger who was almost certainly involved in organized crime. It sounded insane, even in my own head, yet I couldn't deny the sense of rightness that had settled over me. Walking away from Mark didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like I'd finally stopped making the mistake I'd been living for years. The car slowed as we approached Lisa's apartment building in a modest neighborhood across town. Michael pulled smoothly to the curb and turned to me. Ms. Bennett, I've been instructed to give you this. He handed me a small envelope, and to remind you that Mr. Russo's offer of assistance remains open, should you need anything at all. I took the envelope, oddly touched by the formality. Thank you, Michael. He nodded, his expression professional but kind. It was a pleasure meeting you, Ms. Bennett. I hope to see you again. The words carried a weight beyond simple courtesy, as if he too expected our paths to cross again. I thanked him once more before exiting the car, clutching my purse and the mysterious envelope as I walked to Lisa's building. She was waiting at the door, her expression a mixture of concern and burning curiosity. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, enveloping me in a fierce hug. "You scared me to death." She pulled back to examine my face. "Are you really okay? Mark was saying crazy things. Something about you leaving with some dangerous man." "I'm fine." I smiled, realizing it was true. "And yes, I did leave with someone, but it's not what you think." I glanced back at the black car, still idling at the curb. Michael raised a hand in a subtle salute before driving away. "Can we go inside? I'll tell you everything." Once in her apartment, surrounded by the comfortable clutter of Lisa's life, I opened the envelope Michael had given me. Inside was a key card and a note in elegant handwriting. "The penthouse is yours if you need sanctuary. No strings attached." Lisa peered over my shoulder. "Okay, you need to start explaining. Right now." I took a deep breath, tucking the key card safely into my purse. "It started last night at dinner with Mark." As I recounted the events of the previous evening, watching Lisa's eyes grow wider with each revelation, I realized that my life had irrevocably changed course. Whatever happened next, whether I ever saw Dominic again or not, I had finally chosen my own path, and for now, that was enough. "You're telling me that this guy, this complete stranger, just swooped in, punched Mark, and whisked you away to his penthouse?" Lisa's voice rose with each word, her coffee forgotten on the table between us. "And you're just okay with that?" We sat in her small kitchen, the afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. I'd spent the last hour recounting the events of the previous evening, watching Lisa's expressions shift from shock to concern to fascination. "When you put it that way, it sounds insane," I admitted, tracing the rim of my mug. "But Lisa, you didn't see how Mark was treating me. You haven't seen it for months." Her expression softened. "I knew things weren't great, but you always brushed it off when I asked." I was embarrassed. The admission hurt, bringing a flush to my cheeks. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it had gotten, how small he made me feel. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Em, you could have told me." "I know, I struggled to find the words. I think part of me didn't want to admit it to myself, that I'd chosen someone who treated me that way, that I was staying. And this Dominic guy saw it immediately?" I nodded, remembering the intensity in his dark eyes. He saw everything. It was like he could read all the things I'd been hiding. Lisa leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. "And you're sure he's not just some rich creep with a white knight complex, swooping in to save you for his own agenda?" The question was fair, one I'd asked myself repeatedly since leaving his penthouse. "I don't know him, not really," I admitted, "but he didn't pressure me for anything. He gave me a place to stay, no strings attached." I pulled out the key card he'd sent with Michael. "He's still giving me space, see?" Lisa examined the key card, her brow furrowed. "Emma, be honest with me. Do you think this guy is involved in something illegal?" I hesitated, remembering the bodyguards, the shoulder holster, the way people deferred to him. "Probably," I finally said. "But I don't know details, and he didn't offer any. That's concerning." "I know." I took a deep breath. "But right now, I need to focus on getting my things from the apartment and figuring out what comes next. One crisis at a time." Lisa nodded, practical as always. "We'll go tomorrow while Mark's at court. I can borrow my brother's truck." She gave me a searching look. "Are you going to call this Dominic guy?" The question hung in the air between us. I thought about the business card in my purse, the way my fingers had itched to dial that number the moment I'd left his presence. "I don't know," I lied. Lisa's expression told me she wasn't fooled, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, you can stay here as long as you need." The sofa pulls out. That night, lying on Lisa's surprisingly comfortable sofa bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the past 24 hours. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent now. Mark had finally stopped calling and texting after I'd sent a brief message. "I'm safe. I need space. Please don't contact me for a while." Beside my phone lay Dominic's business card. The embossed lettering caught the moonlight filtering through the window, seeming to glow faintly in the darkness. I reached out and traced his name with my fingertip, remembering the intensity of his gaze, the certainty in his voice when he'd said, "This isn't goodbye." Before I could second-guess myself, I picked up my phone and typed his number into a new message. "Thank you for the key card. I'm staying with Lisa for now. Emma." I hit send before I could change my mind, then set the phone down, my heart racing inexplicably. I didn't expect a response, not at this hour, but barely a minute later, my phone buzzed. "I'm glad you're safe. The offer stands. Anytime. Sleep well, little bird." The nickname sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder of the note he'd passed me at the restaurant. "Your cage has a door, little bird. The question is whether you're brave enough to fly." I set the phone aside without responding, but I fell asleep with his words echoing in my mind. The next day dawned clear and cool. Lisa had taken the morning off work to help me retrieve my things from the apartment. We drove across town in her brother's pickup truck, my anxiety mounting with each familiar street we passed. "We'll be in and out in an hour," Lisa assured me, squeezing my hand. He'll never know we were there, but as we rounded the corner to my street, my heart sank. Mark's BMW was parked in its usual spot. "He's supposed to be in court," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. Lisa slowed the truck. "Want to abort?" "We can try again tomorrow." I closed my eyes, imagining another day of wearing borrowed clothes, another day of feeling untethered from my own life. Then I thought of Dominic's words, "You're worth more than he ever recognized." "No," I said, opening my eyes with new resolve. "I need my things. He can't stop me from taking what's mine." Lisa gave me an appraising look, then nodded. "That's my girl." She parked the truck and turned to me. "I've got your back, Em. Always." Mark opened the door before I could use my key. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, still wearing yesterday's clothes. For a moment, seeing him so disheveled, I felt a pang of guilt. Then he spoke. "Where the hell have you been?" His voice was cold despite the evident emotion on his face. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Lisa stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of me. "She's here for her things, Mark, that's all." He ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. "You left with him. After he assaulted me. Do you know who he is, Emma? Do you have any idea?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze directly. "I know he treated me with more respect in one evening than you have in months." Mark's face contorted with disbelief. "Respect? Dominic Russo doesn't know the meaning of the word. He's a criminal, Emma. His family runs half the illegal operations in this city. Russo." I finally had Dominic's full name. The confirmation of what I'd suspected, his connection to organized crime, should have frightened me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. "I'm not here to discuss him," I said steadily. "I'm here for my clothes, my books, and my mother's jewelry. Then I'll be gone." Mark's expression hardened. "You think it's that simple? You embarrass me in public, disappear for a night, and then just walk back in here like nothing happened?" "No," I said quietly. "I think it's that simple because our relationship is over, Mark. It has been for a long time. We both know it." Something in my tone, a certainty that hadn't been there before, made him pause. He studied my face, perhaps seeing for the first time the change that had come over me. "He's gotten into your head," he finally said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "One night with that thug, and you've thrown away everything we built." "We didn't build anything, Mark. You controlled, and I submitted. That's not a relationship." I stepped forward, no longer afraid of his reaction. "Now I'm getting my things. You can either help or stay out of the way. But you can't stop me." For a tense moment, I thought he might refuse, might try to physically prevent me from entering. Then his shoulders slumped, and he stepped aside. "Fine. Take what's yours. But when he's done with you, when you see what he really is, don't come crawling back." I walked past him into the apartment that had been my home for the past year. Everything looked the same, the neutral decor Mark had insisted on. the formal arrangement of furniture that had never felt comfortable, yet it all seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. Lisa followed me, shooting Mark a warning glance as she passed. Together, we moved efficiently through the rooms, collecting my clothes, books, and personal items. I felt Mark's eyes on me the entire time, but he remained silent, watching from the doorway. In his bedroom, I retrieved my mother's jewelry box from the back of the closet, checking that the pearl necklace she'd worn on her wedding day was still inside. The sight of it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. What would she think of my choices? Of where I found myself now? I closed the box gently, tucking it into my bag. Whatever she would have thought, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't have wanted me to disappear piece by piece in a relationship that diminished rather than nurtured me. As we carried the last of my boxes to the truck, Mark finally spoke again. "This is a mistake, Emma. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." I paused, turning to face him one last time. "No, Mark. Staying with you would be the mistake. I'm finally correcting it." His face hardened. "You think he cares about you? Men like Dominic Russo don't care about anyone. You're just a new toy to him." I flinched, the words hitting a vulnerable spot. Was that all I was to Dominic? A momentary distraction? A woman he'd seen being mistreated and decided to rescue on a whim? "Goodbye, Mark," I said, refusing to engage further. "I wish you well." He laughed bitterly. "Right. Tell that to your new boyfriend. I'm sure he wishes me well too." I turned away without responding, climbing into the passenger seat of the truck as Lisa started the engine. We pulled away from the curb, leaving Mark standing alone on the sidewalk, a small figure growing smaller in the side mirror. "You okay?" Lisa asked softly as we turned the corner. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. "Yeah, better than I've been in a long time, actually." "So," she glanced at me sideways. "Dominic Russo, huh? That's a name I've heard before." "Me too," I admitted, remembering snippets of news stories over the years. Charity galas, business openings, the occasional vague reference to investigations that never seemed to lead anywhere. "But I don't know much about him. Maybe that's for the best." Lisa's tone was gentle but concerned. "Em, whatever this is, just be careful, okay?" I nodded, staring out the window as the city passed by. "I will be." But even as I said it, I knew I'd already crossed a line. That night at the restaurant, when our eyes had met across the room, something had been set in motion that I wasn't sure I could, or wanted to stop. Back at Lisa's apartment, surrounded by the boxes and bags that contained the physical remnants of my life, I took out my phone and typed another message. "Got my things from the apartment. Mark was there. He mentioned your last name." This time, Dominic's response came immediately. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" The concern in those simple words warmed me. "I'm fine." Lisa was with me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Have dinner with me tomorrow. There are things you should know." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. This was the moment to step back, to create distance from this dangerous, compelling man who had upended my life in the space of a night. The smart choice. The safe choice. Instead, I typed, "What time?" "Dinner with Dominic." The words echoed in my mind as I stood before Lisa's bathroom mirror, scrutinizing my appearance. I'd chosen the nicest outfit from the clothes I'd retrieved, a simple black dress that Mark had always dismissed as too plain. Now I appreciated its elegant simplicity, the way it skimmed my curves without clinging. "You sure about this?" Lisa leaned against the doorframe, concern etched on her face. "No," I admitted, applying a final touch of lipstick. "But I'm going anyway. At least you're meeting him at a restaurant. Public place. Smart move." I nodded. Though Dominic had offered to send a car, I'd insisted on meeting him at Aurelio's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. Part of me wanted to maintain some control over the situation, to have the option of walking away if needed. "Don't wait up," I told Lisa, grabbing my purse. "I have my key. Just be careful, Em." She squeezed my arm. "And call me if you need anything at all." The taxi dropped me at Aurelio's precisely at 8. The restaurant was housed in a renovated historical building, its facade elegant and understated. Inside, warm lighting and the gentle notes of a live piano created an atmosphere of refined intimacy. "May I help you, ma'am?" The maître d' approached with a polite smile. "I'm meeting someone," I began, but was interrupted. "Ms. Bennett." He nodded with immediate recognition. "Mr. Russo is expecting you. This way, please." As I followed him through the restaurant, I noticed the subtle nods of acknowledgement directed at us from staff and several diners. Not the obsequious fawning I might have expected, but something more profound. A quiet respect tinged with wariness. Dominic rose as we approached a secluded corner table. The sight of him sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie tonight, a concession to casual elegance that somehow made him more approachable than he'd appeared at La Riviera. "Emma." My name on his lips sounded like both greeting and caress. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I allowed him to pull out my chair, hyper-aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne. As I sat, I noticed we were in a quieter section of the restaurant, away from the main dining area, with a clear view of both entrances. Even here, he was strategic. "Wine?" he offered as a waiter appeared silently at his gesture. "Just water for now, please." Dominic ordered for us both, a sparkling water for me, a glass of red wine for himself. Once the waiter departed, he leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes studying my face. "You're nervous," he observed. "Wouldn't you be?" I countered, smoothing my napkin across my lap. "I'm having dinner with a man who may or may not be connected to organized crime, who punched my ex-fiancée 2 days ago, and who seems to know more about me than should be possible after one chance encounter." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "When you put it that way, I'm surprised you came at all." "So am I admitted. "But you did." His expression grew serious. "Because you want answers." "Yes." Our drinks arrived, providing a brief respite from the intensity of his gaze. I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "You mentioned there were things I should know," I finally said. Dominic nodded, swirling the wine in his glass without drinking. "I believe in transparency, Emma, at least as much as my position allows." "Your position in the Russo family," I clarified, watching his reaction. If he was surprised by my directness, he didn't show it. "Yes." "I'm sure your ex told you about my family's reputation. He suggested you're involved in illegal activities. Some of my family's businesses operate outside conventional law, yes." Dominic's voice remained calm, matter of fact. "I won't insult your intelligence by claiming otherwise." His honesty was both unsettling and refreshing after Mark's constant manipulations and half-truths. And what exactly does that mean for someone like me? Someone who's involved with you? Dominic's gaze sharpened at my choice of words. "Are we involved, Emma?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sitting here, aren't I?" A smile, slow and genuine, transformed his serious face. "Yes, you are." He leaned back slightly. "To answer your question, my world is complex. There are parts of it I keep separate from my personal life, but I won't pretend there aren't risks." "Risks," I repeated, thinking of the bodyguards I'd seen, the gun he carried. "Physical risks? I have enemies," he acknowledged. "But anyone close to me is protected." Fiercely, something flashed in his eyes, something possessive and primal. "Your safety would be my highest priority." The waiter returned to take our orders. Dominic suggested the restaurant's specialties, a burrata appetizer, followed by handmade pasta for me and also buco for him. I nodded my agreement, finding it easier to defer to his knowledge of the menu than to pretend my mind wasn't reeling from our conversation. Once we were alone again, I forced myself to ask the question that had been haunting me. "Why me, Dominic? Of all the women you could have rescued, why did you choose me?" He was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "I told you before, I recognized something in you. A strength beneath the vulnerability." He took a sip of his wine. "My mother was like that. Quiet, underestimated. My father misused her kindness, treated it as weakness. By the time I was old enough to understand, to intervene, she was diminished." Pain flickered across his features. I swore I would never stand by again while someone was treated that way. So I remind you of your mother? The thought was oddly disappointing. No. His voice was firm. You remind me of who she might have been, had someone seen her worth before it was too late. His eyes met mine, but that's only part of it. What's the rest? The corner of his mouth lifted. Do you believe in fate, Emma? I don't know, I answered honestly. I never used to. Nor did I. But sometimes... He paused as our appetizer arrived. Once the waiter had gone, he continued. Sometimes two lives align in ways that can't be explained by chance. When I saw you in that restaurant, something shifted. I felt it. I wanted to dismiss his words as practiced charm, the kind of line a powerful man might use on a woman he desired. But the intensity in his eyes, the slight hesitation in his usually confident manner, these suggested sincerity. I felt it too, I admitted softly. Dominic reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been imagined. Then perhaps that's all we need to know for now. We ate our appetizer in companionable silence, the tension between us shifting from uncertainty to something more like anticipation. When he asked about my work at the library, I found myself opening up, describing my love of books, the peace I found in organizing knowledge, helping people discover new worlds through reading. You light up when you talk about it, he observed. It's beautiful to watch. No one had ever described my passion for my modest job as beautiful before. Mark had always treated it as a quaint hobby, something to be tolerated until I found a real career, or more likely, became a full-time wife. What about you? I asked as our main courses arrived. What parts of your work bring you satisfaction? He considered the question seriously. Protection, he finally said. Ensuring the safety and prosperity of those under my care. My family, my employees, my community. The methods might be unconventional, but the goal is always security. Is that how you see what happened with Mark and me? You were protecting me? At first, perhaps, Dominic twirled pasta around his fork. But it quickly became something more specific. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. What? His eyes met mine, dark and serious. Possibility. The word hung between us, laden with meaning. I felt it too. That sense of standing on a precipice, of a door opening to something both frightening and exhilarating. This isn't simple, is it? I said quietly. Whatever this is between us. No, he agreed. Simple is overrated. We finished our meal talking about lighter topics. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled, the history of the restaurant around us. Dominic was surprisingly well-read, quoting poetry and discussing classical literature with the ease of someone who had received an excellent education. I found myself relaxing, enjoying his company beyond the dangerous allure he exuded. After dessert, a tiramisu we shared, Dominic signaled for the check. May I drive you home or... He hesitated, something he rarely seemed to do. Would you like to come back to the penthouse? Just to talk, he added quickly. The view of the city at night is spectacular. I should have said no. Should have asked him to drive me back to Lisa's. Should have taken more time to process everything I'd learned. Instead, I heard myself say, I'd like to see the view. The satisfaction in his eyes made my heart skip. My car is waiting outside. This time, there was no bodyguard in the front seat, just Dominic and me in the back of his sleek black car as it glided through the nighttime streets. We sat close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, though he didn't touch me. Mark called me today, I said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. He left a voicemail warning me about you again. Dominic's jaw tightened. What did he say? That you were dangerous, that I didn't know what I was getting into. I turned to look at him directly. Was he right? Dominic met my gaze unflinchingly. Yes, he said simply. I am dangerous, Emma, to my enemies, to anyone who threatens what's mine. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But never to you. Never. The certainty in his voice, the gentleness of his touch, they formed a contradiction that defined him. Dangerous, yet protective. Powerful, yet considerate. I believe you, I whispered, and realized I meant it. The car pulled into the now familiar garage beneath his building. As we rode the elevator to the penthouse, a tension built between us, electric and undeniable. When the doors opened directly into his foyer, I stepped out tentatively, suddenly hyper-aware of the implications of being alone with him. Dominic seemed to sense my nervousness. "Wine?" he offered, moving toward the kitchen to give me space. "Please." I wandered to the wall of windows while he opened a bottle. The city sparkled below, a carpet of light stretching to the horizon. It was a view that represented everything Dominic was: elevated, powerful, removed from the ordinary world yet overseeing it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" He appeared beside me, offering a glass of red wine. "Breathtaking," I agreed, taking the glass. Our fingers brushed, sending that now familiar current through me. "Emma." His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I want to be clear about something." I turned to face him, finding him closer than I'd expected. "What's that?" "I didn't bring you here with expectations." His eyes searched mine. "Whatever happens between us, whatever you want to happen, it's your choice. Always." The power he gave me in that moment, the control he willingly surrendered, moved me more deeply than any declaration could have. This man, who commanded respect and fear from others, was offering me the freedom to determine the course of whatever was developing between us. I set my wine glass on a nearby table and stepped closer to him. "What if I choose this?" I whispered, reaching up to touch his face. Dominic remained perfectly still, his eyes darkening. "Are you certain?" In answer, I rose on tiptoe and pressed my lips to his. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his arms encircled me, pulling me against him as he deepened the kiss. His mouth was warm and insistent against mine, passionate yet controlled, as if he was holding back, letting me set the pace. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine. "You're sure?" he asked again, his voice rough with desire. "I'm sure," I whispered. "I want this." "I want you." His response was immediate. He lifted me into his arms as if I weighed nothing, carrying me through the penthouse to his bedroom. There, beneath the city lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, we surrendered to the connection that had sparked the moment our eyes had met across that restaurant. Hours later, lying in his arms, my head resting on his chest, I traced the tattoo over his heart, a stylized shield with a single star in its center, surrounded by intricate designs. "Family crest?" I murmured, still languid from our lovemaking. "Of sorts." His fingers played idly with my hair. "A symbol of protection, of honor." I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. In the dim light, his face was softer, the sharp edges of his public persona smoothed away. "Will you tell me something honestly?" He nodded, his expression growing serious. "Is this real? Or am I just—" I hesitated, voicing my deepest fear. "A novelty? Someone different from the women you usually pursue?" Dominic sat up, bringing me with him, his hands cradling my face. "Emma, listen to me." His voice was low, intense. "What I feel for you, what I've felt since that first moment, it's unlike anything I've experienced before. This isn't a game. It isn't temporary." His thumb stroked my cheeks. "You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness of his words should have alarmed me. Instead, they filled a void I hadn't realized existed, a longing to belong, to be valued, to be seen. "Yours," I whispered, and sealed the promise with a kiss. In the morning, waking in his bed to the soft glow of dawn, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made my choice. The path ahead would not be simple. Dominic's world was complex, sometimes dangerous, far removed from the quiet life I'd imagined for myself. But as he stirred beside me, his arm tightening around my waist, I recognized the truth that had been growing since that fateful dinner. Sometimes freedom means flying from one cage into the unknown. Sometimes salvation wears the face of danger. And sometimes, the greatest risk of all is refusing to take a chance on an unexpected love. Dominic's eyes opened, finding mine immediately. A smile curved his lips as he pulled me closer. "Good morning, little bird," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Good morning," I replied. settling against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adjustments our different worlds would require, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer invisible. In Dominic's eyes, dark, dangerous, devoted, I was seen, valued, protected. And for the first time in years, I was truly free.